Hey folks, Scott here, coming to you with another movie review like I promised I would, and it's of the 1986 film Out of Bounds. The film stars Anthony Michael Hall, Jenny Wright, Jeff Kober, Glynn Turman, Raymond J. Barry, Pepe Soraya, and Jerry Levine. And also, before I forget, you also have like a small little role for the musician Meatloaf, who apparently plays the partner of Jeff Kober's character Roy. He plays a guy named Meatloaf plays a guy named Gil. So just thought I'd throw that in there. Anywho, the film did not do very well at the box office. Barely made over $5 million, and it was written by Tony Caden, directed by Richard Tuggle. This was his second film, and it was apparently the final film he would direct. He didn't do anything else after this. Previously, he directed a movie called Tightrope with Clint Eastwood that did much better, made over $40+ million at the box office, much higher number compared to what this made. And supposedly, according to the trivia on IMDb, Tuggle was actually replaced by Eastwood, supposedly, on Tightrope for being slow in his directing abilities. So, don't know if that's necessarily true, but that's what I read on the IMDb trivia, so could be true, could be fiction, but who really knows. Anywho, and getting to the... And also, this was Anthony Michael Hall's attempt to kind of break away from the geeky, awkward type of characters that he was typecast for being, like in 16 Candles, Breakfast Club, and Weird Science. This was his kind of breakaway to star in a more, not necessarily dramatic, but a more action-filled thriller like Out of Bounds, in contrast to his previous work. He doesn't do a bad job acting-wise, it's really kind of hard to buy him as that tough guy. Well, not necessarily tough guy, but, going from innocent teen to a tough guy. But I did like the whole theme of, an innocent young teen, at the wrong place, wrong time, in a completely different environment, is forced to kind of survive and, go against the odds, pretty much, so to speak. Anyways, getting to the plot, it revolves around a teenager. I'm guessing he's 18 years old, according to the poster. He's a farm boy from Iowa named Darrell Cage. It looks peaceful, but it also probably looks boring as hell. And speaking of that, his mother is wanting a better life for him and herself, because when Darrell overhears the conversation, we hear that they've been trying to keep their life savings running on this farm. So everything they've put into it's drained them financially too. The father is, I guess, in denial about that, thinking that it's tradition. He doesn't want him to go, but mother is putting her foot down, saying, "Nope, enough's enough. We're moving, and I want a new life away from you and away from this place." So as a result, Darrell Cage ended up getting sent to L.A., where his older brother lives, named Tommy. It's also established that at some point he left earlier, not exactly when, but he probably got sick of the place in Iowa. Specifically, I don't know if I mentioned this is in DeWitt, Iowa. I don't know what that's like, so I'm pretty sure it's nothing but cornfields up there for sure. But anywho, Darrell, along the way of traveling to L.A., he's on the plane. He briefly meets up with this, has a conversation with this punker chick, a punker chick, so to speak, named Diz. Yeah, Diz. I'm thinking of Diz or Dez, but anyways, her name is Diz, played by Jenny Wright, who takes kind of a liking to him, kind of flirting with him, even saying, "Hey, why don't you come see me? I work at this restaurant called the Beanery," and Darrell even kind of considers it because he really doesn't know a whole lot of people. I mean, and before any of this happened, early in the film, we were introduced to a character who later turns out to be Roy Geddes, who is a drug dealer and working on the docks, and he's trying to secretly transport heroin through the means of transportation, and as a result, he ends up killing the driver of the truck that secretly he hid the heroin in, and he plans on somehow transporting it to some degree to eventually get, maybe $1 million that it's apparently worth, that we will later find out. Anywho's, somehow, one way or another, he puts it in the similar bag that Darrell has his clothes in. But the brother picks up the bag, and as a result, he actually ends up picking up the wrong bag, and Roy sees this and tries to chase after the person that took it, but he's not able to as they drive away, but he's able to, from his point of view, see the license plate number and tracks them down to that address. The next day, Daryl Cage wakes up, finds 2 dead bodies of his brother and his wife, finds a gun, and apparently one of the caretakers, whoever it is, or his next door neighbor, says their sewage tank is overflowing, and gets into a brief little conflict with Daryl, a little fight for the gun, and eventually the gun goes off and shoots that person, and Daryl runs away trying to escape. And at first he actually tries to call the cops to try to surrender and give the weapon away, but cops blow him away at the phone booth instead, and he tries to hitch a ride, and eventually he gets on the bus and actually hides the heroin in the bus and tries to, connect with Diz, because apparently she's the only person that Daryl even knows at this point, because his family's already split and elsewhere. And eventually she's reluctant, but of course through a little bit of convincing in time, she's able to help him get connected. She actually gets him to change his appearance and his attire, like he dyes his hair black and wears a lot more up-to-date outfits. And even gets connected to this guy named Marshall, played by Gerald Levane, and who we later find out is actually a DEA agent. Eventually he tries to, get a meeting set up between him and Roy. Unfortunately, Roy, being the vicious person that he is, tries to actually take out Daryl, but Daryl uses his smarts and actually grabs a bottle and smacks Roy in the fucking head with it, causing some bleeding, and escapes out of the club. And basically, it's a cat and mouse game that ensues between Roy and Daryl, because one's trying to fight for his innocence and trying to also avenge the death of his brother, while he's also involved or trying to convince the detective, Lieutenant Delgado, played by Glynn Turman, who is reluctant to even believe Daryl and thinks that he's still a suspect in his brother's killing. And so a little back and forth goes between them, and eventually, though there is a brief team up with one of the other DA agents, played by Raymond J. Barry and Pepe Serra, however, they turn out to be nothing more than corrupt, dirty cops. One of them gets killed by... they both end up getting killed by Roy himself. I forgot to mention the actor's name, Jeff Kober. This is actually his film debut, as later find out. He does a fairly good job in that role. I'll get to the pros and cons of that later. But anyways, basically, Diz and Daryl end up falling for each other, and Diz has always been kind of alone, even though she's connected. They don't know the real her. She's naturally a good person, but unfortunately, she kind of fantasizes and makes up a few lies about herself to sound cool. I'm sure we all do that sometimes, and that's kind of relatable. Anywho, further down the line, Daryl and one of the corrupt cops, Hurley, ends up teaming up with Daryl briefly, and while they do get to Roy, he actually tries to take out Daryl, but Roy, still somewhat alive, actually shoots him dead. And then the little mind game between him and Daryl, asking him to try to go for the gun. He says, maybe you'd be quicker than your brother. He looks like he's going to go for the gun, but Daryl, as we've seen before, is pretty good with a knife. He actually throws it into Roy, killing him. And eventually he's able to somehow return he eventually returns the heroin to the police, and ends up going off with Diz, and that's pretty much it. Overall, it's not a bad little it's not a bad movie for, an 80s little thriller. And it goes by at a very, solid pace. It's not a very long film. It's like an hour and a half or so. I'll get to the cons. The cons, while Anthony Michael Hall does a fine job in the role, I think he stepped away too quickly, and he wasn't really quite the kind of transition from an innocent teen to a badass, so it seemed to just happen too quickly, and I don't quite buy him as that, but maybe if he, I don't know, maybe he rushed into it too quickly, I don't know, but he's not bad acting-wise, like I said, but it's kind of hard to buy him as that. And what else did I have a problem with in this film? Maybe I wish there would have been a little bit more of a backstory of the brother, because while the brother seems like a generally good person, there's not really much. They don't really get a chance to really establish a whole lot of relationship between them. But I guess, the movie wants us to feel sorry for it, and we quite don't, so it's... Sorry. Anywho, I guess that could have been done better, flesh out the characters a little bit more. And, there was something else. I find that very odd, that a very plot-convenient device where the bag's the same thing as him, and the whole airport security thing, I don't know what it was like back in those days, but wouldn't they have at least checked the bag a little bit more, or something like that? That's a bit of a nitpick. Just the whole airport security seemed a little bit off. And, oh yeah, the chemistry between Daryl and Diz, I mean, the actors do a fine job, but I felt like their chemistry wasn't quite that great. It was kind of lackluster at best. I mean, there is some good moments whenever, Darlene tells the truth about who she really is. But it seemed kind of forced, and it's just that their chemistry was lackluster for the most part. But I guess I'll go into the pros. The pros, all the actors do a fine job. Anthony Michael Hall showed that he was... It's a bold role for him to take on, because, he did a lot of awkward, teen, geeky kind of movies, which are good in their own right, but this was kind of an interesting transition, and in certain parts he does okay, but like I said, he probably got out of that realm too quickly, so... But his acting is definitely not the problem. He does fine with the dialogue and does the best of what he's given to work with. And Jenny Wright does a fine job playing a very, likable character, even though we later learn she kind of made up a few lies to sound cool. But, I understand that. We all want to make up a few lies, just to fit in within society. Because we all are deep down, good people, but we're not perfect. So I can kind of relate to that. And Jeff Kober, he's probably the best part about this movie. This was actually his film debut. It showed that he was really an intimidating villain and someone that you do not want to cross paths with, especially in this one scene where he's interacting with this Dugdree, this woman that's his trick, I guess, or whoever she is. She has a pet mouse, and then whenever he's handling with her and going over what he needs, he actually kills that mouse just by crushing it with his hand, just to show how much of a bastard he really is. And also, what else was it? He just has that look of a natural villain, and he would go on to play a pretty mean, sadistic villain in the movie called The First Power that had Lou Diamond Phillips. It's also on YouTube, and if you want to, you should check that movie out. I'll definitely, do a movie review of that sometimes. He has a knack for playing really good villains, so it's no surprise that Jeff Kober has really shown that he's capable of doing that. So, easily the best part of the film for me. And this was his film debut, so an impressive start for Jeff Kober, so gotta give it to him. And you have Raymond J. Barry, I'll get to him. Glynn Turman, he's in the film for some time. He plays the detective that, is reluctant to trust Daryl, and of course by the end, he believes him, because they do run the other set of prints, which turn out to be Roy's. And he has an interesting line of dialogue, which refers to the title itself. Here it is. Here's the quote: If it's true what you're saying about this kid, you're way out of bounds. Something like that. So, but for the moments he's in, he does okay. You have Raymond J. Barry. He does okay in the role of as the corrupt cop Hurley. And then his partner, Pepe Serra, as Moreno. He's there, but he doesn't really do a whole lot. And Gerald Levine, the guy that plays Marshall, the one that kind of helps set up the meeting, He does okay, pretending to act like he's a drug dealer, but we later find out he's actually a DEA agent, which is cool. But unfortunately, I guess that's the other con. Unfortunately, he's killed off, and we don't get a chance to see much of that side of him. So I guess they want it to be a surprise reveal when he's dead. So then also you have Stuart Copeland, who did the score for this film. He also contributed to the soundtrack as well. And overall, his score was actually one of the best parts I liked, especially in the opening sequence and then the sequence in Iowa and throughout the rest of the film. He was really a solid composer in his own right. He actually composed the music for a TV series called The Equalizer with Edward Woodward. That was a good show. It showed that he was capable of doing something other than playing drums with the police, which is what he was known for. So Stuart Copeland's score was very effective in this film. And then, of course, you also had Meat Loaf, and his role was kind of meh. You don't really see him till like 3/4 into the film. So there you go. But what else can I say was the pros? Oh yeah, Richard Tuggle really used the L.A. as setting pretty well. Like he actually shot inside the clubs that both Daryl and Diz were in, and the meetings between him and Marshall and Diz, of course. So Richard Tuggle really used that setting to the best of his ability, showing the exotic clubs, and of course you even have a cameo by suing in the Banshees at the time they were known. So that's even cool. So overall, I thought it was a solid little thriller. It's unfortunate that this film has not gotten on the physical media, and the best way to watch it is probably on YouTube, and it's very cheap. And like I said, I rented this movie on YouTube on the HD format for around $3 and change, $3.19 or $3.18, somewhere around there. And I think it's well worth at least a watch. Just to show that Anthony Michael Hall was willing to transition out of that geeky role status that he was known for at the time. So overall, it's a solid little thriller. Not perfect, but it's definitely worth watching in my opinion. So, okay, well that's going to do it for me, and I think I did well in this review, even though I'm a bit tired as fuck. So, there you have it. Alright, guys. If you like what I've done so far, click that like button and subscribe. Otherwise, I will see you in another video. Bye-bye.